Welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. I'm joined, as always, by my millennial observer, my sidekick, Creighton Vaughn.
Hello, everyone. How are y'all?
So you are in full his production swag.
I am. I'm just trying to get those advertising dollars before we get demonetized and taken off YouTube. I don't even think we're monetized.
We are not monetized
Before we get
anyway.
censored in some way. I just want to get all those advertising dollars.
You want to make sure that when we get censored, his productions get somehow connected to us and shut down. Like if we're gonna go down, we're all
taking
going
everyone
down.
with
We're
us.
taking everyone with us. So you made a comment to Josh about his production swag, and he sent you some stuff. And that,
Yeah, he sent me the shirt. I actually got the hat from him as well, obviously. And if he's listening, I'd like some more stuff.
So one of the reasons
Tumblers, glasses, mugs.
glasses, mugs, koozies.
Yes.
I'd like a keychain, his production keychain,
I would absolutely take a koozie. I have a koozie collection.
a koozie collection.
Yes, I do not have a His Productions koozie yet, though.
He does have stickers, which
Oh,
do you have a
good
His production sticker?
I don't have a His Productions sticker.
I affectionately put it on my refrigerator.
I would turn around and look behind me, but there's a curtain there.
There's
now,
a curtain
so you can't
there.
do that.
Yeah, the refrigerator's right behind him. Anyway, we are bantering just for a minute, mainly to allow everyone to join us. So these videos air on YouTube. The easiest way to find our YouTube channel is go to outlawradio.live. And if you do, I encourage you, please be a subscriber. We need to up our profile. It's something we've been working on, developing, building, but now we need you to increase the profile, kind of our status by subscribing to the Outlaw Radio YouTube channel. And then people are logging onto Facebook, watching this video. We air at 8 p.m. on Thursdays, though we record this on Wednesday. And so it's not necessarily live, but we are recording the Outlaw Radio Show, and we're inviting you to kind of look behind the curtain, see how the sausage is made, so to speak.
See our pretty faces.
See our pretty faces. Faces for radio, no doubt. You
No
know,
doubt.
I had a friend, so we're giving people just a few minutes here to kind of log in, see that we're there. Hopefully things are propagating on Facebook. If you're watching right now, like it, share it, get the word out so people will join us. I will say before we start the show, so we made the announcement this past Sunday at Calvary 316 that we'll be reopening Sunday the 31st. So not this coming Sunday, but the following Sunday. And we've waited a few extra weeks so that when we do open, we can kind of open without restriction, not kind of the phased in approach, restricting the number of people that can come, social distancing, trying to keep people 6 feet apart, all that. And so we made that announcement. A good friend of ours, Chaz, he sent me a text and he said, "Hey, really enjoyed today's service. We're going to drive up and be there."
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know Chaz was coming.
Yes. And then he said, "Hey, by the way, hadn't seen you in a little while. The coronavirus, the camera has definitely added 20 pounds. and my reply to Chaz was, "It's not the camera that added 20 pounds. It's my face."
Yeah. The virus will get us all right.
It's always one of those things when someone's like, "Hey, does this dress make me look fat?" The appropriate answer, not the right one, but the correct
the
answer.
correct one, not the appropriate one. The correct one.
Your fat makes you look fatter.
Oh, man. This is why, for the record, people out there who are watching the behind the scenes, this is why we don't riff terribly often, because we insult fat people, apparently.
Of which one was fat.
I used to be, no longer.
And one is getting there. You know why they call it COVID-19, right?
Because it adds 19 pounds?
Because it adds 19 pounds.
Nailed it.
Boom. So hopefully you've all joined us. Regardless, we're going to dive
Hopefully
right in.
we haven't lost any of you.
Hopefully we gained a few, we lost a few. That's kind of the nature of it. Creighton, the first block, as always, is 14 minutes.
14 minutes.
And we're going to dive right in, kind of set the stage for what we'll talk about throughout the episode. So you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. My name is Zach Adams. I pastor a church located just outside of Athens, Georgia. The name of the church is Calvary 316. If you're a local, come check us out. Our Sunday service is at 10:30. You can watch our service stream on Facebook.com/Calvary316, or you can watch our service stream Again, happening 10:30 on Sunday mornings via our YouTube channel. That's also Calvary316.live is the easiest way to find it. If you're local, Sunday, May 31st, we'll be opening our doors. We've been closed for the last almost 2 months now, a little over 2 months because of the coronavirus, like most churches, doing our part to limit the spread and flatten the curve. We have just been meeting in a digital platform, but Sunday, May 31st, which is Pentecost Sunday, we are reopening our doors, and we are doing so a little different than most others. We are opening our doors without any restrictions. We have waited a few extra weeks just for that purpose. We're going to have nursery ministry, toddlers, kids, preschool, our children's ministry, youth ministry. We'll have our coffee bar open. We are going for it. And needless to say, in the state of Georgia since May 1st, the governor reopened our state at the end of April. A lot of fanfare about that. A lot of people were saying that Governor Kemp was going to kill us all. The opposite has really happened. We have not seen a spike in cases. We've all been waiting. We've given it time. Since May 1st, hospitalizations due to coronavirus in the state of Georgia have dropped by a third. So we've seen actually a significant decrease, which is wonderful. I think most rational people are rooting for this to go away. We're rooting for a vaccine. We are rooting for normalcy. We are rooting for people to get back to work, to be able to put food on their table and pay their mortgage. We are facing a lot of economic hurdles. And so our church, we waited. We live in a unique state that allows us to kind of do so. But the 31st, Pentecost Sunday, we are opening our doors. And so if you're listening to this and you're local and your church might still be closed, but you'd like to, worship with a body of believers, come hang out with us. 31st, May 31st, we're opening our doors. And so be our guest. Either way, we are still service streaming, and we'll do so for the foreseeable future. I do hope wherever you're listening or however you're listening, whether you're listening on one of our wonderful radio partners, the show is nationally syndicated. We are all over the place. Our audience is growing rapidly, and we are so humbled and grateful for that. So if you're listening on the radio, we're so glad that you're with us. If you're instead listening on the podcast, so maybe Outlaw Radio is not airing on your local dial, that's fine. Every episode of the Outlaw Radio Show is podcasted in its entirety. And so if you're listening on the radio, you're listening on the podcast, either way, stay with us for the next hour as we seek to deconstruct the negative perception that the world has of Christians by boldly talking about relevant topics in an honest, genuine way. If you're on the radio in particular, and you're listening on the radio and you're not able to listen to the show in its entirety, again, that's what the podcast is for. So hang with us as long as you can, and then download the episode and catch back up and listen to the rest. I am joined by the Millennial Observer, my sidekick, Creighton Vaughn. Thank you for being with me, Creighton.
Thanks for having me, man. Glad to be here.
How are you doing?
I am doing okay. I'm doing well.
Most people can't see this, but Creighton is rocking his production swag, both a hat and a shirt.
Yep, hats and shirt, both of my favorite color, red and black.
Red and black, University of Georgia,
look.
Georgia Bulldogs. I know that's not your reason, but we'll roll with that. I only bring it up because it's always nice to just give a shout out to Josh Brown and his productions. This show would not exist in any format if it hadn't been for Josh and his belief that we had something to say, and then his support for the Outlaw Radio Show. He was very influential in getting us on the radio, helping us craft kind of our identity and our branding, and really setting the tone for just the mission and vision of what makes our show different and why we think our show is important. And so shout out to Josh Brown, his productions, great people. Josh, I know you're listening. Thank you so much for all you do. We are grateful. Creighton, why don't you set the stage for really the two topics that we plan to try to tackle in today's episode?
So the first is we want to talk about censorship in the pandemic, how things are being restricted, mostly online, because I don't know if there's any other kind of media these days. Specifically talking about things like YouTube and Facebook, where they're censoring what people can and can't say about the virus, and how that affects us moving forward.
We also plan to talk about something that's very relevant with what's happening in our world, and that is civil disobedience.
Right. And Right, because those two go hand in hand a lot of the time.
They go hand in hand. They're related topics. And so we've kind of been pivoting our show over the last few weeks. Again, it's hard to have a show that claims to talk about relevant topics in an honest and genuine way and not address the coronavirus. But at this point, everyone's mind is really made up, not just about the virus itself. Most people's opinions have kind of solidified on the way forward, whether the virus is contagious. Most people have made up their mind about where we've been and where we should go. And so there's really no point to beat that horse dead. And so what we're wanting to do and kind of pivoting our show is to address things that have been happening during the pandemic that maybe haven't garnered the amount of media attention that they deserved, as well as to speak to things that are happening related to the pandemic that are very important. Let's start by talking about censorship. So over a year ago, we did an episode of the Outlaw Radio Show about Alex Jones. Now, for those of you who don't know who Alex Jones is, Alex Jones is the founder of a media group known as InfoWars. InfoWars developed a huge online following, had a radio presence, but really took off on YouTube as its platform. They were very slick and savvy in regards to their media content. They knew how to develop a following. I think at some point, Alex Jones had 20 million or so subscribers on YouTube. I mean, they were massive. Now, what makes Alex Jones kind of interesting is that he was an equal opportunity offender. I wouldn't necessarily call him a Republican. I wouldn't call him a Democrat at all. I wouldn't call him conservative, nor would I call him liberal. He's kind of his own monster. If he tilts anyway, it's far right, to the point that Alex Jones has also been known to peddle conspiracy theories. Now, there is a huge segment of our population that eats that type of stuff up. Going all the way back to September 11th, he was one of the individuals that peddled that it was an inside job, that George Bush was behind it, that this connected to Halliburton and oil and money and a pretense to go into war. And he didn't get a lot of heat for it because liberals were saying the same thing. You had Fahrenheit 9/11. Wasn't that the name of the movie, the Michael Moore movie?
I was in third grade when 9/11 happened. I don't have any idea.
Creighton was too young to remember, but you had Michael Moore, a big liberal activist who was also peddling the same type of stuff.
I feel like I've heard his name before.
Okay. You have a computer in front of you. You can look it up.
Oh, I could, can't I?
Specifically, yeah. You're
I
here
have
to
the
also do
computer.
some research while you're listening. But Michael Moore was also peddling the same type of conspiracies. You've heard that one, that 9/11 was an inside job. What got Alex Jones kind of in trouble, though, is he also started saying that Sandy Hook, the mass shooting that killed so many innocent elementary school students, just a heart-wrenching thing. This happened several years ago. He was also saying that it was an inside job, that it was kind of all manufactured as a pretense for the Obama administration to go after our guns and to limit the Second Amendment. Now, the reason I bring this up is Alex Jones' InfoWars helped Donald Trump get elected. Alex Jones was a Donald Trump supporter, although I don't believe Trump ever appeared on his show or ever had any type of public press with Alex Jones. Alex Jones and his radio show and his YouTube following, that whole far right wing, rallied behind Donald Trump and is one of the reasons Donald Trump got elected. Well, fast forwarding into the administration, Alex Jones got singled out and in almost a week's time was universally banned from the internet. Now, his website still exists, but he was kicked off of YouTube, censored from YouTube. Twitter eliminated any presence of Alex Jones. His Facebook page was shut down.
Social media went real scorched earth on Alex Jones.
Alex Jones, they tried to wipe him from the web. I know at one point Google was even going after the hosting companies that had InfoWars, were actually hosting the data. Just kind of a crazy thing, complete infringement on the First Amendment. And yet very few people, if anyone really, came to Alex Jones's defense because he's a Looney Tune, because the things that he was peddling were way on out there, and even his mannerisms were kind of abrasive. He was kind of a blowhard to a large extent.
He always sounded like he was having an aneurysm.
He always said, he yelled at you basically the whole time.
Constantly.
As a matter of fact, there was a season in the show Homeland where they actually based a character off of Alex Jones and just kind of they were trying to make Alex Jones look crazy, but the character portrayed him looking more normal than he actually is. The only person I heard at all on any major news network, any major media, come to Alex Jones's defense, not to defend any of the subject matter, but just what was happening, was probably Tucker Carlson on Fox News saying, wait a second, this is an overreach. If they do this to him, they're laying the framework that they can do this to anyone. I picked up on this, and we did an entire episode about Alex Jones and about censorship, and how once you start getting into the First Amendment, infringing on the rights of free speech, once you start getting into this game of classifying speech as hate, that then becomes the pretense to silence people, to eliminate all speech or not approve speech. Now, during this pandemic, we have seen a ramp up of the restriction of speech to the point that today you had a major news network, one of their main morning anchors, publicly went on Twitter and said that she was going to lead a campaign to have Twitter remove the president's Twitter account, to ban Trump from being on Twitter, stating that the things that he was saying was fake news and that no one should be able to hear from the president of the United States. Now, like what he's saying or not, we have a big problem if we're allowing these conduits of information to pick and choose sides. Again, one of the big problems I had with the entire idea of fake news is that fake news is defined by someone calling it fake news. There's a lot of times that the trusted news sources, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Washington Journal, on and on and on, will post stories that will come to find were patently false or filled with falsehoods. By definition, that's fake news. Now, I'm not saying it was intentional. News, facts, things develop. But once we start labeling things fact or fiction, we're just starting to tread in an area that I think the Constitution sends up red flares of saying, warning, 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 this is not a good thing. This is not smart. We now have 3 years of an entire trumped up Russiagate, a Russian collusion story unraveling right before our very eyes. You had CNN, MSNBC, NBC, ABC, CBS peddling a story where the high levels of our government and the Obama administration were saying things as definitive truth. Come to find out, under sworn testimony, they were contradicting. We're going to continue this thought. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with the Outlaw Radio Show. Man, 14 minutes flies by.
It does indeed.
So you have a few examples of this happening right now that you can bring up?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to pitch it to you right here at the beginning and get into some specifics. You ready?
Yes. Nervous, but ready.
All right, 12 minutes.
Hold on.
Try to minimize your ums. You almost start everything with an And I know that's nerves.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. All right, you ready? 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show. I want to just start off by saying one of the most important aspects of our show is to interact with you, the listening audience. If you have any questions about anything said on the show, if you want to challenge an opinion you didn't like, if you want to submit topics for us to address in a future episode, there's no topic that's off limits. There's a few ways that you can reach out to me. First, email. It's old school, but it's simple. Our email address is info@outlawradio.org. Also, facebook.com/The Radio Outlaw. You can like us. You can also follow us on Twitter @radio_outlaw. If you're listening on the radio or if you're listening on our podcast, which is available on Apple Podcasting, Google Play, as well as Spotify. I encourage you to also tune in to the video recording of the show. We are airing these videos on our YouTube channel as well as Facebook page on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. The easiest way to find this information, find a quick link to the YouTube channel, is to visit outlawradio.live. Again, outlawradio.live for our YouTube channel. You can watch the Outlaw Radio Show Thursday nights at 8 p.m. We are talking about censorship and kind of the ramp up of censorship that's been taking place during this pandemic. There are a lot of acclaimed, recognized, bona fide, multi-degreed scientists that are having their videos banned from YouTube. As a matter of fact, recently, the CEO of YouTube, which is owned by Google, Alphabet, came on and she, in an interview, said that anyone that is directly contradicting what the World Health Organization has been saying of coronavirus, if you're contradicting that narrative, the narrative that they're presenting, the facts they're presenting, they're going to consider you to be fake news, peddling and rumor and innuendo, and they're going to remove your content from YouTube. We've been seeing this. Now, one of the problems I have with that is the assumption is that the World Health Organization is a trusted resource of information. We now know that the World Health Organization buried so much information at the beginning of this pandemic by covering for some of the great mistakes that China made, to the point that the President of the United States has withheld our funding of this organization until they clean up their act, clean their house. They came out and said, you don't need to wear masks. And then, a month and a half later, they're like, oh yeah, you should wear masks. Same with the CDC. So when you're playing this game of censorship, who gets to determine what is true and what is false? Who gets to determine who has a right to say something and who doesn't? When did we get into a point in America where we are blindly allowing the censorship of free expression and free thought? Why are we not having debate concerning facts, and instead we're quelching all debate altogether? One of the things that really piqued my interest about this particular topic is the fact that one of the number one podcasts in all of America, and it's been this way for quite a few years, is the Joe Rogan Experience. His podcast, he just announced that due to censorship, the things that are happening on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook, I forget what the date is, but he is going to be pulling all of his content from those platforms and going exclusively to Spotify, which is really becoming a big player in the game because they're kind of kicking back. They're trying to work their way into being a platform of free expression. Another guy, the Rubin Report. Rubin has created a whole nother platform called Locals, in which creators can own their content and you can't be banned and you can develop a following. Where once you develop a following, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube can't just arbitrarily one day decide, that disclaimer you signed when you signed up, we can just shut your page down for any reason, just to our own discretion. I have a friend, we've talked about this in the past, Ryan Baumberger, the Radiance Foundation, a pro-life organization. He had his accounts shut down on Twitter because he dared question certain things that were being stated by the honorable representative from Minnesota, Ilhan Omar. Again, this has gotten out of control. Now, Creighton is with me, our millennial observer. He also partly acts as a bit of a researcher for us. And so, Creighton, give us a few examples of censorship and how this is happening in our current environment.
So a couple that I found that were really interesting was one I first heard about while watching a podcast I really like called Louder with Crowder. And it was these two California doctors named Erickson and I think it's Masihai.
Yes, I've heard of this story.
And basically they did a live stream conference that was put up on a couple of ABC and NBC, I believe, affiliate TV channels, where they talked about how they didn't think that things were as bad as they seemed in early April.
They were based in California.
Right.
And not only were they on a major news network being interviewed because they're the frontline doctors,
Right.
but their whole, and it was like a 14-minute video. Their whole spiel was that they were just challenging the idea of social distancing, the health and well-being of a full lockdown, and just what they were seeing on the ground in California.
Yes. They also challenged a couple of other things like whether or not the numbers had been inflated, like the death numbers, because they apparently own some urgent care centers, and they know that there are people who are being pressured into writing down coronavirus as the means of death.
The cause of death.
The cause of death, thank you. Instead of whatever it was that might have been more responsible than coronavirus was. Like if it was influenza and they'd had it for a long time, and they happened to also have a positive coronavirus test, then they were being told to write down coronavirus. So they were thinking that the number of deaths might have been inflated, which would then change the death rates and change the way that we should approach this. They were removed from YouTube and panned by at least a few. As I was researching, I found NBC articles as well as a Forbes article that was panning Facebook for not shutting them down because YouTube did, which is crazy to me.
So you had, and here's the context, two doctors, like
actual doctors.
These are not conspiracy wing nuts. This is not a fringe right-wing website.
These aren't healing crystal people who call themselves doctors.
Right. These are, and full disclosure, we don't know if they're Republican or if they're Democrat.
No idea.
Their politics didn't matter. These are frontline doctors treating actual COVID-19 patients, doing the work, risking their own lives, stepping out, and just challenging the narrative based upon empirical evidence of things that they were actually seeing.
Right. And they're not going at it like COVID isn't a thing. They're not the guys out there who are saying that the entire disease is a conspiracy or anything like that. They're just saying that maybe some of the things we're doing aren't necessarily correct.
I saw a interview with a doctor, epidemiologist actually, who specializes, I forget what institute, maybe it was the Hoover Institute. Again, multiple PhDs, one of the best thinkers on these type of topics. Again, not right, not left, not political at all. Came out with like a 10-minute, very rational challenge to shutting down schools. And the premise of what he was saying is that coronavirus got here before we knew, and it had spread rapidly already through our culture. And so we're trying, the measures that were put in place might have worked if it was more of a containment, like if the virus could be contained. But by the time we became aware of things, the virus was not containable, meaning that at that point, shutting down schools and forcing people into shelter in place, like you were creating incubation areas where, for example, New York City comes to find out, like 65% of the people coming to the hospital with coronavirus had been infected at home because we were forcing everyone into because they already had it. Like this thing had spread so much more quickly than anyone had recognized or understood. And so his whole deal was like, now that we know the cat's out of the bag and you can't like get that back in, shutting down schools is a terrible idea because kids, while we know are not affected to really almost any extent.
Right. They have very, very, very low death rates, and a lot of them are just asymptomatic.
They're all asymptomatic. But what they would do is that they would quickly develop herd immunity within our culture. So they would be super spreaders, develop herd immunity, which if you don't have a vaccine is the only way. Like the only three solutions you have to a pandemic is a vaccine, which would be great, but that takes time, if even possible. Like we don't have a vaccine for the common cold, not an actual cure. So a vaccine would be great. You quarantine everyone indefinitely for all time.
Right. You never come in contact with the virus.
You never come in contact with the virus. Or you quarantine the people most at risk, aka your nursing homes, your elderly, those with pre-existing conditions. And then you let everyone live their lives, catch it, spread it, and develop an immunity to it so that you kind of eradicate it within society. Those are your three options. And his whole point was like, we don't have a vaccine. We can't stay sheltered in place forever. So the only actual reasonable solution is we got to get back to normal, and we got to let our kids go back to school. Because he was saying this at a time where earlier this week, you had Fauci saying, I don't know if we're going to have school in the fall, and people lost their mind.
In the fall?
In the fall. He was saying that we might not have school in the fall. And so he came out and was like, listen, I have just as many degrees, and I'm saying there are other ways to look at this. Boom. Within like 24 hours, ghosted. Video gone. Deplatformed, buried. There are examples after examples after examples of this taking place. And the problem is if you're not given diverse opinion, you're not able to determine for yourself what is right or wrong. And we live in a country supposed to be founded not on collectivism, but the individual. That I make decisions for me and my family. I don't have decisions made for me. But if I can't access diversity of thought and I'm given an opinion, I'm no longer free. Don't go anywhere. We'll continue this thought with more of the Outlaw Radio Show. You have any more examples?
I don't have any more examples. I do have a couple of quotes that I found interesting because I was, I found a couple of articles on NBC and Forbes, and both of them were very much in favor of censoring people who don't line up with.
Okay, let's pick up that thought. Let's just dive right in.
Okay. What's the time?
The time here is 11 minutes. Glad you're with us. We're gonna talk more about this at the end.
Yeah, cool.
All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show. We're talking about some of the things that have happened in the midst of this pandemic. We could spend weeks, and we likely will, talking about various components of all of these things. The most concerning one for me, as a free thinker, I don't like being told what to think. In fact, when I'm told what to think, I'm immediately skeptical that there's an agenda behind what I'm being told. And my guess is most of you listening feel the same way. I tell our church, don't just take what I'm saying about the Bible at face value. Be Bereans. And what that means is the Bereans were a group of people, a church, Paul discussing, they challenged, they studied, they heard what Paul said, and then they went to the scriptures for themselves to make sure this was truth. We're to be Berean as believers in regards to those that preach. I tell our congregation, don't just take what I say at face value. Study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman. Study, check it, validate it. And if I'm wrong, challenge me. Anytime we're told to shut up and believe it, we're immediate, like flares go off, our little radar, like something isn't right. And in the midst of this pandemic, certain ideas we're not allowed to debate. We're supposed to take at face value. Again, I mentioned this earlier in the show. It's alarming. YouTube is the largest platform of online video content in the world. It is a powerful platform. And yet, they've made it abundantly clear. The CEO did an interview that if you, as a doctor, challenge or contradict anything that the World Health Organization hasn't approved, or if you seek to challenge or contradict something that they've said, they will ban you. They will pull your content. Now, the sad thing is that our government has allowed social media platforms to be able to run rampant. We've given them certain tax breaks, certain designations that allow them the freedom as private enterprise to govern the content on their sites. Way back when, we started seeing this begin with jihadis that were using Facebook for recruitment. And everyone in America was like, yes, Facebook needs to take them down, needs to censor them. And then you started seeing far fringe neo-Nazi groups and racial white supremacist groups recruiting and developing followings on Facebook and sending stuff out. And it was like, no, that stuff needs to be censored. That needs to go away. smut killed MySpace. And so people were very, very protective of Facebook. Like, do not allow this type of content on the platform. The problem is that this has now been taken to an extreme where you're not allowed to challenge the liberal orthodoxy, or you get kicked off. Where this ends up going, and if we don't take a stand for it now, while it might not be your issue, it will become your issue. One of the thoughts that I had, imagine a scenario. So there are fundamental Christian beliefs, biblical beliefs, that we have that are not in vogue when it comes to the liberal elites in our country. We have certain beliefs that are not acceptable, that are in fact forbidden and frowned upon. Beliefs such as marriage being between one man and a woman, the idea that homosexuality is a lifestyle, is a sin, is a sinful behavior, is not sanctioned by God, is spoken out against by Scripture. It's not okay for Christians to say that Jesus wants to free you from sin and change your identity, including homosexuality. It's not permissible for us to challenge the idea that there are two genders, that God created man and woman, that there is a masculinity and femininity. We're not allowed to talk about that God created genders and then gave them uniqueness, distinction, different roles. It's not couth to talk about Noah's flood or to challenge the evolutionary doctrine. My point, it's not okay to say Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light, that no one comes to the Father except through him. Unless you support full universalism, any claim of exclusivity is considered to be religiously bigoted. Here's my point. There are fundamentally held Christian beliefs that are not in vogue with our society. At what point do Christians find themselves getting banned from these particular platforms, censored from these platforms because of our biblically held positions? You say, well, Zach, okay, so what? What's the big deal? Well, here's the big deal. Think about it. One of the reasons that the church has been able to be civil in the midst of this pandemic, and one of the reasons that the church has been able to socially distance and help people shelter in place, one of the reasons that the church was willing to close our doors to in-person gatherings to try to, again, flatten the curve, is because we had technology at our disposal that we could utilize to still continue to fulfill some of our calling.
As a stopgap.
It's a stopgap. Again, if you're listening, Creighton Vaughn, the Millennial Observer, is here to interject accordingly when it's necessary. And you have a few quotes that we'll get to in a moment about these things, right?
Absolutely.
Church, imagine. So we've been able to be good citizens because technology, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, has allowed us to stream our services to our people using their platforms. Imagine a scenario where our biblically held beliefs, like what if YouTube in the middle of this pandemic made the decision, you know what? YouTube and Facebook decided, these Christians, nope, you're all gone. And they shut us down. In 1 week, we had to quickly shift from in-person gatherings, right, to an online platform. But what if the online platform decided the next week, no, we're not going to allow you to have any voice on our platform because you're all bigots. And we don't approve of the religious positions that you hold. What do you do then? I mean, really, what if that was the dynamic? There's not a single church that has the technology to be able to quickly replicate what Facebook and YouTube and Twitter was able to provide us. You could say, oh, well, we'll stream to our website. Well, what if they tried to do the same thing that they did to Alex Jones? And the companies that host our church websites also stepped in and said, you know what? You guys, it's hate speech, and we're not going to allow you to host any content on our websites. It's amazing. Like, we got to think through these things, because when you allow the restriction of any speech, you open up the door for the restriction of all speech. And then you're placing into these tech companies the responsibility of making the decision of what is okay and what is not for all of us. It's just a terrible, it's a remedy for disaster. Now, one of the things, again, that just so alarming is you would think the fourth estate in our country would be champions for the freedom of speech. You would think that liberals, the ACLU, would be the ones on the forefront of saying, no, 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 you cannot restrict speech. This is a fundamental right. You would think that news networks would find these trends to be alarming. And yet, Creighton, in doing a little research for this, you found quite the opposite, didn't you?
I did. I was on a Forbes article. I don't know if I should say who wrote it or not. I don't know if that's...
It's a Forbes article.
It's a Forbes article. And he's talking about him seeing a bunch of posts that have been taken down on Facebook as well as on Twitter. How some of them were coronavirus related. Some of them were just tangentially coronavirus related. Like it was somebody talking about a food bank that needed support because they were helping people in the coronavirus, all that kind of thing. And this is his quote. He says, Facebook, along with Google, Twitter, Microsoft, LinkedIn, and Reddit, issued a joint statement on combating misinformation on their platforms. That's a good thing, as long as what they're targeting actually is incorrect or spammy information and not quality reporting from generally recognized sites. He goes on to say that those sites include Medium, BuzzFeed, and USA Today, which are the ones that he thinks should be allowed. And I think it's fascinating that you have to then decide who decides what is incorrect, because there are a lot of things that BuzzFeed and I disagree on the correctness about, as well as like generally recognized sites. I mean, is anything that comes from BuzzFeed is okay, or anything that comes from something other than BuzzFeed isn't?
It's not going to be very long until shows like Tucker Carlson and shows that are on Fox News, purely because they're right-leaning, will be banned. Like,
yes.
They won't be able to get them off of cable yet, but their content online will be terribly restricted. Well, we're running against a hard break. We're going to kind of wrap up this thought, discuss a few more things. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Outlaw Radio Show. Got any more quotes?
No, that's about it. I got a couple for the churches in California.
Okay.
That I think are pretty cool.
We'll get there.
This one's 9:30.
Yeah. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show. We are talking about censorship and how this has seemed like this idea of censoring content has ramped up during this pandemic. We see this with all kinds of doctors and content on YouTube and Facebook. There's no question that this is becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger issue. When you have Joe Rogan, one of the biggest podcasts on the planet, making the decision to pull his content from YouTube out of fears of censorship to then move to Spotify, you understand that there is kind of a cultural rumbling occurring about this. A few years ago, I introduced this topic to the Outlaw Radio Show by talking about Alex Jones. And while no one came to Alex Jones's defense, because InfoWars and some of his positions are crazy, like he's a wingnut, no one came to his defense. And yet, to me, it sent up alarm bells of like, if they can do this to him, then they can do this to anyone. And then you've seen this really begin to take off during this pandemic. Hydrochloroquine. You can debate whether or not it has a benefit to helping people recover from the coronavirus if you take it with zinc early into your diagnosis. To the point the President of the United States came out earlier and said that he's actually taking hydrochloroquine. I've taken hydrochloroquine. Hydrochloroquine has been around for like 70 years. It's an anti-malaria drug. Anytime you travel into the third world, and I've been to Haiti, you have to take hydrochloroquine for malaria. It's a malaria pill. And so it ends up there. And there's all kinds of cases for this all over the spectrum. And yet, instead of debating the benefits of hydrochloroquine or not, the side effects, the benefits, etc., if you don't follow just the orthodoxy of what the liberal news networks have already determined to be truth, well, then you are removed from social media platform. It's an amazing thing. I go back, and this is one of the things that blows my mind, is if you really want to talk about the origins of so much of this, the pretense of the need to censor fake news was this, what we know to now be a lie, that Donald Trump is president because the Russians convinced a bunch of people on Facebook to vote for Donald Trump by using false memes about Hillary Clinton. Well, we know that they spent like $50,000 and probably were able, like maybe 100,000 people even saw one of these memes, like the data on it. And we don't even know if that's fully true, but that ended up being the pretense of like trying to remove any pro-Trump material from the internet. We are in a dangerous place. That's what I'm saying. And as a church, we need to be very careful because, again, at some point, our ability to minister through these digital platforms might be at severe risk if we don't toe the line and reject certain fundamentally held Christian beliefs. And that's going to be a day of reckoning.
I would go further and say that there will be the day when it will no longer be okay to be a Christian online. I will say that is a hard line. It's going to happen.
You know, it's interesting that, so in the book of Revelation, when we're examining the end times and scenarios, you know, following the rapture of the church and before the second coming of Jesus, and you're reading through the book of Revelation and the rise of the Antichrist and kind of one world government, and there's a whole point that as kind of the litmus test for your allegiance on things will be the mark of the beast. You know, 666. And there's all kinds of like crazy conspiracies relating 666 and the mark of the beast to Bill Gates and his desire to have everybody like, you know, have a digital tracker that you've either had coronavirus, you have the antibodies, that you've been vaccinated, whatnot. I don't want to get into the craziness of that. But the one detail we are given about the mark and its implications societally at that point is that it will restrict your ability to engage in public commerce. That without the mark of the beast, you wouldn't be able to buy or sell. And thus that would be the punishment for those that are not loyal before you ultimately, you know, there'd be physical persecution for it. But that it restricts your access to the economy. Now, ultimately, there's a lot of ways you can look at how that might develop. We're seeing more and more and more a rapid move away from physical currency. I never carry cash. I use plastic. I don't see my paycheck. It's direct deposited. The government sent me a bunch of money, you know, as a stimulus. And I didn't get anything. It just, ta-da, it was there. What's interesting as you play these things out, to your point, is we are moving more and more and more to an online platform of the economy. That the economy won't operate apart from the internet.
And as the economy moves that direction, so does basically everything else.
So if you're in a situation where if you don't pledge allegiance, if you don't take the mark of the beast, your ability to buy food, to buy anything, like when we talk about being banned from the public square concerning the internet, we get the idea that, well, I won't be able to share my opinions anymore, that the church won't be able to have a Facebook page, that we won't be able to put our sermon content on the internet. That the first wave of this is that our beliefs and opinions and view of the world won't be acceptable in the public square of ideas. So when you talk about the internet has always been like the one place we can go to have free speech. You know, the major networks control the narrative in the media and the news, and yet the internet was the wild, wild west, where you could get content that you wanted that you might not have been able to get on the television. And thus, seeing the restrictions of this, it's alarming. So we've always thought about the internet as ideas and freedom of speech. My point, to your point, is that when the internet becomes more and more and more completely intertwined with the economy, being banned from the internet is not just the restriction of free speech, but it will be the elimination of your ability to make a living, to pay bills, to have money, to engage in commerce. If you don't take the mark of the beast,
To be a functioning member of society.
you won't be, you'll have to go underground. You're growing your own food. You can't buy things from the grocery store. You can't get gasoline because you don't have access to digital banking, to digital credit. You're cut off. And that would be a tragedy. I mean, you would immediately, you take away our ability as a church to share ideas on the internet. Well, we'll just go to parks and start telling people about Jesus.
Right.
No big deal. You eliminate our ability as Christians to be members of the economic society. Well, that has much more profound and immediate consequence. And I think you're right. The question is not, it's not when will we be removed from Twitter and Facebook and whatnot as churches. To me, the bigger question is when will we not be allowed to have bank accounts?
Right.
And we've actually seen this with PayPal. PayPal has been removing certain organizations, pro-life organizations, that violate certain terms of agreement. Once we start allowing banking and online institutions to be able to choose who and who can't bank with you, then we start getting into like real Christian persecution, like we saw in the first century church, where if you didn't take a pinch of incense to Caesar, you had no place in the marketplace, and thus you were outside of society and had no place any longer. We got about a minute left. You have any further thought?
Just that this whole thing, I say it every week. This whole thing is crazy, and I think the world is falling apart. I'm not a date setter. I'm not big into eschatology and all of that. But I do think that we're actually seeing if we're not seeing the beginnings, we're seeing what the beginnings would look like when they start.
Absolutely. And that is a whole nother episode that we'll unpack on the Outlaw Radio Show. Creighton, thanks for being with us.
Always a pleasure.
You've been listening to the Outlaw Radio Show. Check out our website, which is outlawradio.org. You can access our podcast. It's on Apple Podcasting, Google Play, Spotify. You can check out all of our information, contact information from Twitter to Facebook to email. You can get from the website, again, outlawradio.org. Watch us Thursday nights, 8 p.m., outlawradio.live. Again, my name is Zach Adams, and I hope you join me again this time next week for the Outlaw Radio Show. Yeah, we never even got to the second topic.
No, we didn't. We didn't get to the second topic at all. It'll have to be next week with the second topic.
It'll have to be next week that we do the second topic. I want to say, for those of you that are watching, I'm not a conspiracy nut. Creighton isn't at
all.
But I think you really hit on things. So one of the, you'll hear pastors say this all the time, drives me nuts. Talking about the rapture, the Great Tribulation, eschatology. They'll make the comment, we are closer than we've ever been.
It's like saying I'm older now than I was when we started the
Exactly.
episode.
It's like, yeah, of course we're closer than we've ever been, because that was then and it's now. Wait a second. I'm now closer than I've ever been. Wait for it. We're again closer than we've ever been, because until it happens, we're closer than we've ever been. It's like, I understand the idea behind it, but still, I don't know. It's always struck me as weird.
I think that's what's called a tautology. It's a sentence that doesn't actually mean anything.
Like everything Yogi Berra always said.
Yes.
Cash, it's as good as money.
Yes, exactly.
But the reason I bring this up is that I do think you're right, and I think it's worthy of a whole episode to unpack. I don't know. Obviously, we are closer to Jesus' second coming. We are closer to the rapture than we've ever been before. What I do think makes things interesting. So in the book of Revelation, as a matter of fact, add a thought. Let me pull up a passage of scripture real quick.
All right. So I actually saw that the Susan Wojcicki, I don't know how to say her last name, the YouTube CEO.
Yes.
I saw that same quote today saying that anything that would go against the WHO is worthy of being taken off YouTube. By that standard, in January, if you had said that you think coronavirus can be transferred from person to person, you would have been taken off YouTube.
It's like, we're going to really use the CDC came out today with guidelines for churches and schools reopening. It's absolutely moronic.
Oh, really?
I think the CDC should be defunded. Or just, we need new people there because, again, I don't want to change the topic, but you've always heard, 99% of all scientists believe it, the global warming, that it's, we're doomed in 12 years because of computer models. That was
12 years later.
Yeah. So it's like an inconvenient truth. If you really want one, here we are. That's the inconvenient truth. Let me read you a section of scripture, and you as well. So the book of Revelation opens. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants, things which must shortly take place. And he sent and signified it by his angel to his servant John. Now, what makes that interesting, so the book of Revelation deals with a lot of end times, still yet future things to come. Ultimately, it's the revelation of Jesus Christ. It's all about learning more about Jesus. But we learn more about Jesus in things that Jesus is going to do. For example, I see the book of Revelation as like the fifth gospel. Jesus, a lamb led to the slaughter. Now he's the Lion of the tribe of Judah. He's the suffering servant. Now he's a king coming to kick butt, take names.
Oh, yeah.
Tattoo
on his thigh.
Meek and mild, tattooed, riding a stallion, waving a sword. Like the full understanding of who Jesus is. But this phrase, things which must shortly take place, has given people a lot of misconceptions about the book of Revelation, to the point that you have a whole eschatological theory that this all took place in 70 AD because it had to have been shortly take place.
Right.
The problem with that is that in the Greek, what it means is it's like closer to it happening, the signs will happen more quickly. Like for example, you'll know you're closer to the event when there are more signs happening rapidly.
Right.
A great illustration. If you're taking, let's say you're leaving Seattle, you're taking I-5 south to San Diego. You're a long way from San Diego.
Right.
As a matter of fact, the only reason you know San Diego's that direction is because it's south. You're like, this road will get me there because it's going the right direction. Like, it's probably not until at some point in Oregon that you even, you start to get signs of San Francisco. So you're like, I'm heading the right direction. California. You get to San Francisco and you keep going. And then at some point you'll get a sign that's like 600 miles to San Diego. And so boom, there's a sign. I'm on a journey. Boom, first sign. Going the right way. But man, it might not be like 100 more miles before you see another sign. Which means you're a long way away because you're not seeing signs often.
Right.
And yet once you continue down, the closer you get to San Diego, what happens? The more signs you start to see. That's what this Greek phrase means. It means the closer you get to the event, the more signs will start happening. Such as once you get out of Los Angeles and you're going down the 5, the closer you get to San Diego, you start getting signs for the San Diego Zoo, San Diego beaches, San Diego Padres. Like it's boom, boom. So the idea is that the further away you are from the event, the less evidence you'll have that the event's close.
That makes sense.
The closer you get to the event, though you have no idea when it's going to happen, the more signs that are happening, that should be an indicator that you're getting really close to San Diego, or in this case, the rapture of the church, the second coming, the tribulational period. To your point, yes, this coronavirus pandemic. Are we closer? Sure.
We're always closer.
Does it tell us something?
Absolutely.
It tells us a lot because it really does give us an interesting insight. I was talking to Andy our worship leader, about the four horsemen, of the apocalypse. Like, you had war, you had pestilence, you had disease, you had famine.
Right.
Like, if you had war that released bioweapons, like we know that what will result is a quarter of the Earth's population dying. And people will read that and they're like, that's craziness. How in the world could a quarter of the Earth's population die? Yeah, the early estimations of coronavirus, people were saying this could be like 25% of the population. That's a quarter.
Yeah, we lost a third of the European population of Spanish flu in the 1800s,
and a quarter of the Earth's population of the bubonic plague.
Right.
So these
so
things
it's definitely not impossible.
And if this was like experimental release, this wasn't a bioweapon, at least we don't think. But if you did create a bioweapon that was as contagious as coronavirus, but let's say if coronavirus killed 25%, like if it had a death rate of 25%, you could see 25% of the world's population like that.
Easy.
Die. So again, we live in an interesting day where we're actually seeing how certain things described in the book of Revelation might actually be not just possible, but more literal than we might have at first thought.
We're seeing a very tactile example of what it could look like,
Yes.
what it will probably look like.
Jesus, may you come quickly.
Indeed.
Right. Well, anyway, thank you for being with us. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Creighton, thank you for taking time out of your day.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And remember, everybody, we're closer to Jesus coming now than we were when we started.
On that note, peace out.